Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes as I take up some of your questions on various different topics. A little while ago, I touched on answering a question of somebody's about the cast sort of away from the work, not as their characters and different things. And somehow I had like a blank moment and managed to totally just pass over Richard Thomas. And some people said, didn't you get along with Richard? Didn't you see him away from the show? Well, of course I did. I adore Richard. And I think sometimes Richard was sort of in between. He wasn't necessarily one of the adults because he wasn't one of the parents or the grandparents, but he wasn't really one of the kids in terms of on the set. Whereas the six of us, the younger, the kids, excluding John Boy, I mean, we hung out together all the time. We all went to lunch together. Richard was an adult already. He was a young adult. He was only like 21 when we did the first season, but he didn't hang out and play with us per se. Not that we didn't, joke around and have fun, and he was very accessible. So it was sort of like, well, there were the adults and there were the children. And then there was Richard. So somehow I just went, oh, parents and children. But Richard, I adore Richard. Of course, we did various different publicity things together where we were all there, especially early on when we were first promoting the series, and went to things like a Hollywood Wax Museum, exhibit opening of W.C. Fields that we were at. And so there'd be various different things, or some of the launch parties or the CBS affiliate dinners or things like that. So I did get to hang out with him at different promotional events. And of course, there were our cast parties. Away from the set, I remember going to the movies with him. I remember being at his house for parties or things like that. But I remember after, when he started doing theater as well as doing the series, that as often as I could, I would go see him in theaters, doing live performances. And I've seen him do all kinds of shows, and it's always such a treat to go and see him because he's so brilliant on stage. And I know a lot of you have had a chance to see him in To Kill a Mockingbird, where he's just brilliant. And then, of course, I'll always go backstage and visit with him for a little bit. That's always fun. I remember going down to San Diego when he was performing at the Old Globe in a play called Camp David, where he played former President Jimmy Carter. It was a charming play, and I went on, I think it was a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. I drove down from LA and I went backstage, and he knew I was coming. So he was expecting me, and I went backstage and we visited for a while in the green room. We just had it had been a while since we'd seen each other, and he's always so pleased when one of us comes to see his show. It means a lot to him when we come out and support what he's doing. So we had a lovely talk. And then same thing when I went up to San Francisco to see him in To Kill a Mockingbird. My husband and I went up there, and again, he knew we were coming. So afterwards we had planned to go have dinner or go have a meal. So we met him afterwards, and we walked over to a restaurant and, shared a meal together, before we drove back home. So those types of things are always special. First of all, getting to see him perform, and then getting to just spend a little time away from the work to just catch up a bit. And then, there's phone calls and things like that. So we're super close. So I'm sorry, but he warranted his own special moment here. So that's just a touch of the behind the scenes of my relationship with Richard Thomas. This question is from Sonia Swan, who said, love to hear about your favorite movies and music growing up, and if you had any celebrity crushes. Well, in terms of movies or TV shows, there were things that often the TV was what my mom decided we were going to watch. So we tended to watch her favorite shows, and everything was pretty family friendly back then, as we know. So I enjoyed a variety of different shows. I don't know. I always loved I Love Lucy. That's just one of those classic shows that I was able to watch episodes over and over. And that's not necessarily the case with every show. There can be shows that I enjoy, but I don't necessarily choose to watch them in reruns over and over. But there's films there are shows, yeah, there, if it's on, I'll watch it. And certain movies that I just enjoy. Christmas time is one of those points where I watch the same movies every year at Christmas. I have my favorite traditional movies, my, White Christmas and Miracle on 34th Street and The Bishop's Wife and It's a Wonderful Life, all those movies that are part of my Christmas tradition, and I love to watch them again every year. Those and music growing up, it was what my mom listened to. Again, she would have the radio on in the kitchen, I remember that, and she had a beautiful voice, and she would sing along to Doris Day and Rosemary Clooney and Edie Gourmet and lots of those singers from 40s, 50s. I think it was kind of an oldie station at that time. So I grew up with that, and then I grew up listening to her turntable with the music from various different Broadway shows. So that was a lot of the music when I was young growing up, and then by the time I hit the 70s, I was kind of into my own kind of music of the era, the Carole King and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Don McLean, America, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. I mean, all of those, Creedence Clearwater Revival, all the Bread. I mean, it just goes on and on. And then it moved into like Elton John, and that's sort of, if you want to call it classic rock, was the 70s considered classic rock? That was really my probably biggest music influence, and then it kind of went from there. So as far as celebrity crushes, I mean, I would watch movies and and think Cary Grant was really handsome. Was it really a celebrity crush? I don't know. I mean, there was certainly has always been a lot of really good-looking men in film and television. So I certainly could go, wow, he's really. I remember Robert Redford thinking, always thought he was really handsome. And the first time I saw Brad Pitt, I think in Legends of the Fall or something, I just thought he was just adorable. And most of those people I never really had a chance to meet. So who knows? Maybe, I don't know if I would tell them if I saw them that I had a big crush on them. But I mean, I just, like anybody else, any of you sitting watching movies or TV, I can sit there and think, oh, that person's really attractive. So thank you for that question. This question is from Magdalene Negron, who, this kind of continues from there, who said, can you share what inspired your singing? And that was really that music that I listened to around the house with my mom, singing along to the radio and things like that. And then her Broadway recordings and soundtracks. And so I always loved singing around the house, getting a chance to do that little recital when I was young with my brother and sister, with my mom's voice teacher organized. That was fun. I loved singing. I loved singing around the house. I didn't know I was terrible, but I enjoyed it. I remember going down the street to one of my friends girlfriends who lived just down the street, and we would go into this sort of redone garage space that she had, and we'd pretend we were putting on shows, and we'd sing, and it was just that kind of joy with the music. And then when I was 15, I went with Mary McDonough to her brother's high school was doing a production of Camelot, and she asked if I wanted to go with her, and I said, yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think I'd ever seen an actual musical production, and yes, it was a high school production, but I thought it was a really good high school production. I thought they did a great job with the musical. I fell in love with the musical, so that started, I think, a love really of musicals and an interest in doing musical theater. So that moment really sort of changed my life. Interesting question here from Jack Kirby fan, who sort of said, I was just thinking the other day, Judy, many have told me that even when an actor is interviewing, they are performing and acting versus being themselves. I see none of that on all of the interviews you have had. To me, they are just everyday people doing a job they love. That's good. And I don't think it's always true that you aren't being yourself, but I think we're aware of what we're saying, and being cognizant of trying not to misspeak or say something that could be misinterpreted, or just, I think you want to accomplish something with that interview. You want to project yourself in a certain way, whether it's, a confidence, whether it's positiveness about the project that you're talking about or your life. So I think there's that element of just awareness. You then said, I can also imagine if you really are a huge star, that 1 in a billion, yep, that in that world you are just bombarded with constant pressure to be the star. And I can imagine the loneliness of such a world that can end as quickly as it begins, where you have zero privacy, zero time to yourself, and are always having to live up to fan expectations. I wondered your thoughts on big stars. Are they just overwhelmed? Are they just so stressed because of the pressures of being a big star? That one's, I've had a chance to peripherally see that, and enough to realize that I don't think it is a world that I would choose to live in. Yes, it would be nice to have enough star power to pick and choose your projects, to always feel like you had another opportunity to do another great film. But there is a trade-off for those big stars where, not being able to just spend time with your family in public and always having to sort of be in disguise and being chased by paparazzi or being interrupted all the time, that, people, each person who comes to you, it might be their one opportunity to interact with you. So it's a big deal for them, and they don't necessarily want their experience with you to be that you're having a bad day or whatever. They have this one opportunity, and I think you start becoming aware of that, even if you, in that moment, it's like the last thing you want is somebody coming up and wanting your attention, even if they're being really nice. So it does require that you sort of, put on your game face and do your best to be polite and interact with them in a way that you would if you were in a better mood. So I think the majority of us try to do that, but we aren't dealing with that nonstop thing, and not so much in a really invasive way as can happen with people who are just really being followed and photographed all the time. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. The tricky thing with that is the question of zero privacy. Some people can feel that, well, you're in the public eye, so you ask for that, and that people somehow have the right, that you have signed away your life. You are obligated to do a certain degree of publicity to promote projects that you do, and that's fine. So you signed up for that. But did you sign up for, some of the more invasive things when you're just, dealing with your family, or you have some crisis point, or you want to be able to go out without doing your hair and makeup and just enjoy a day at an amusement park or something, and the things that you just can't do. That's tough. It's a very odd world. And is it too high a price to pay for doing what you love? Good question. I don't know that I have an answer, because I haven't really had to experience it on that level. I don't have a good answer to it. I think that each circumstance stands alone, but I think that the overzealousness of what can start seeming like you're being stalked, that can be dangerous. Your family doesn't necessarily sign up for it, so do they have a right to their privacy when it's not them in the public eye? So those things, I think there should be some boundaries on it, but it's hard sometimes to find ways to set boundaries. So anyway, it's a tough question. That's what I have for this segment of Behind the Scenes. I'll be back with more of your questions in another segment. Thanks for watching.